Welcome to the Bias Buzz, powered by Accuracy Media. I'm Don Irvine, and he's Brian McNichol. All right, so we'll start off today with the probably the bigger political news type of things, which is the upcoming primary in New York. 95 delegates at stake. Trump looks like he has got a commanding lead. Kasich is in second, and then Cruz is a distant third. But that's not keeping Cruz from campaigning and doing anything in the state as well as Kasich. I think they're still on the delegate hunt because of the way the delegates will be apportioned on the primary.
Right, that's right. Trump will almost certainly win the popular vote, but many of them are portioned by congressional districts, and Western New York can be Cruz country. I mean, he can win or rival or come close there. And end up with close to an even delegate haul, but be slaughtered in New York City, and vote totals way against him, and still end up with a good collection of delegates.
Right, and as I understand it, the way this kind of works with those precincts or those districts is that if Trump doesn't get 50% in any of those districts, then it will be a portion. If he gets over 50%, he gets them all, I guess it is. Otherwise, he gets 2 out of 3 or whatever. So Cruz has a chance to pick up some delegates. There's no doubt that Trump will add to his delegate lead as a result of this, and he needs to do something because they're coming off of Wyoming and Colorado and all these other things, where things that haven't gone as well for Trump at this point. So this is kind of a crucial thing for him to do.
Yeah, it is, and it's you were talking about Colorado, where he lost every delegate because of organizational problems. Basically, he didn't have any staff there. He didn't go there himself. Cruz focused a lot of effort there and got 25 delegates out of it. And so there's a big, if you look on the internet today, people claiming that he's being cheated. He's being cheated out of the election. They're stealing this from him. There was no vote. It's like the rules are the rules, and they're out there for all to see. And those rules have not changed. But there's this big thing, like he's cheating us by knowing the rules better than us.
Right. I mean, this has become a very big subject for debate. I mean, Trump has gone on the offensive that the process is rigged. His campaign guys going out and they're saying Cruz is using Gestapo tactics. I really hate it when you start bringing in this whole Nazi Gestapo thing to anything. I mean, it's just a bad idea, I think, to do that. But this is just kind of crazy. Whether or not I agree with the way Colorado ran their process, that's one thing. But those were the rules, and those were agreed to. Every state has their own set of rules and how they conduct whether or not they do a primary, a caucus, or whatever. I agree with you. I mean, it's really Trump's fault for not having the ground game. I mean, this is where his weakest link has been. There have been other accusations too about that I've seen on the internet and on Facebook where people are complaining about how Cruz is trying to steal the Trump delegates, but I believe that they're kind of misunderstanding that the delegates are going to be bound. Most of them are going to be bound on that first ballot, and still a good percentage on the second ballot. But as they become unbound, if they go into a contested convention, that's where the big thing plays in. So the Cruz people are doing something that's really, really crucial and really, really important and smart, is that they're trying to line up support that should Trump not get the 1237, which is highly likely, they can come and get this thing because they have now wooed these other delegates that will no longer be bound to Trump.
Washington Post is reporting this morning that there are enough delegates who are not bound to Trump after the first ballot who would go for Cruz, that if Trump does not get to 1237, Cruz will win the nomination.
And there's still the whole Kasich thing where he keeps thinking that he's going to be kind of the white knight beyond any potential aspect of somebody being parachuted in to save the party at this stage.
No one's buying what he's saying.
No, I don't think it is either, and I don't think his speech about kind of the two Americas or the two paths really did any good. It didn't have the ring that it should have had or could have had. I don't think it helped him at all.
Right. And I think a big part of what's happening is, and the Trump people don't quite know how to deal with this, is the nation has changed its mind on him. There was a point where people were like, billionaire, he's done a lot of stuff, maybe this could work, And now the more that he has campaigned, the more we know about him and what he would do as president, the less people want to vote for it. So did so many vote for him under the early impression that we can't overcome it with the late impression? That's the question. And it looks like it's going to be pretty close, right? But if when you get to July, if he doesn't have the thing, that's why like I'm against all this vote a month before the election stuff, because it's like it's what you think on election day, right? All these things you learn till election day, And the other thing that America is waking up to is political parties are private organizations. Now they have some rules on disclosing money that don't apply to other private organizations because they are nominating people for public office, but they're private organizations. They choose how they choose their candidates. This is not something that government dictates, and there's no, fairness component to it. It's whatever they say it is.
That's right. And so then we also have the other aspect of Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, potentially running. He had I don't know what to call it, just the video on his website, a commercial, a web ad, whatever you want to classify it as. It was extremely presidential in terms of the way he laid that out. One of the best things I've ever seen. He came out yesterday and said that he's absolutely not going to run. He's not interested. But as we talked before the program began, we've seen this story before.
Right. I don't think they can airdrop a guy in who has not run, who's not spent any money or time campaigning, and repeatedly says he doesn't want to do it. He may be right. He may be wrong. He may be, wants to do it later, which is what I think is the situation. But he is saying, what kind of campaign ad would that be for Hillary? This guy doesn't even want to be here. I at least want to be here.
Yeah, I mean, and he has a lot of work to do in the House. I mean, part of it, too, is that he may be trying to at least set the stage for the next Congress. He doesn't know how many Republicans he will have. He may lose a few in this cycle. He needs to hold them together. He needs to show America, show the voters, at least in this party, that he has an agenda. He has a plan to how to deal with this. Potentially it might be, a Hillary-led White House, and so he has to be prepared. So this is probably a smart move on his part. And, there's no doubt that Ryan's a smart guy and he's got political ambition, so the speakership may not be his final stop.
Right. And what if you could tell the country, hey, I fixed Congress? As bad as Congress is viewed in the country, I'm the guy who fixed it. I'm the guy who made it work again. That would be a pretty good campaign slogan. The other thing about the primaries I wanted to say, though, is it's not just New York. It's the Acela primary, Delaware, Maryland, there's a few more, Connecticut maybe. Okay, those don't sound like Cruz hotbeds either, but it would be good for him to not get crushed. You don't want a 4% in those states. It's good to spend a little money and show up on the scoreboard.
Right, and what they're doing is, they're going to places that have really been abandoned by the party over the years because, this hunt for delegates is going deep.
Right.
And, this is an unusual election, as we've talked about this before, because there are more states that actually are important. Here in Maryland, the primary on the 26th still weighs heavily on this race because every delegate counts. And so the candidates are going to spend time doing things. Even on the Democratic side, this is happening. Hillary yesterday opened up 2 campaign offices in Maryland. Frankly, I don't think she would have done that if Bernie Sanders wasn't nipping at her heels.
That's right.
So I think, all these very interesting dynamics this time around for all of this. Let's go on to something else here, too. Now, so on Sunday, the Boston Globe produced a front page that basically was a satirical front page with what would happen a year from now if Donald Trump was the president, and it invited quite a bit of scorn even from the media. I assume that you saw that?
Yeah, I saw it. Tear gas prevalent around the White House.
Deportation's about to begin. The stock market's going to collapse.
China ready to go to war.
Yeah, trade war, all this kind of stuff.
It's like, really, do you think he could change that much stuff? Do you think it would be, the other thing is this campaign has everybody doing things they've never done before. This is a paper of record, right? This is one of the big, important newspapers of America completely becoming a political organ.
Right. This is a major metropolitan newspaper. It doesn't have the sway it used to have, just like every other big newspaper. The circulation has plummeted. the New York Times, spent, what was it, $1 billion buying this paper a number of years ago, and then they wound up selling it off for a song because they just bought it at the wrong time. The whole industry just, cratered not long after they purchased it. But and this is definitely a liberal newspaper. I mean,
Right.
accompanying the satirical front page was also a very strong editorial about why the GOP they should stop Trump. Now, this is kind of like this. Wait a minute, the paper is actually they're not trying to instruct the Republican Party as to why and how they have to stop Trump. Now, they are in the Hillary camp, but on a journalistic level, I'm bothered by this whole thing because what is a major newspaper like this doing, producing this satirical, this mock front page to begin with?
Naked fear mongering.
Yeah, and then and we know that none of the other candidates, particularly Hillary or Bernie, are going to come under this same treatment, right?
That's right. And it's like, where is your 250% increase in taxes to pay for what Bernie wants to do? Where's that stories about how that decimated the economy and set people against each other and 40% unemployment and so forth?
I'm sure the Republicans could easily write a couple of front pages for the Boston Globe,
That's right.
I think you and I both know those will never see the light of day.
That's right.
Thing about Hillary and Bernie too, as we talk about that, the attacks seem to kind of shift a little bit. Now Bernie has been going kind of after not Hillary's qualifications necessarily to be president, but now her judgment, which I think is interesting because he can use the scandals. It's a little tricky for the Democrats. I mean, if they dig too deep, they're going to hurt themselves and give more fodder for the Republicans. But I think this is from a Sanders standpoint, I think this is a good angle. I mean, I think you can clearly question Hillary's judgment on a lot of things, including her email, and these kinds of things.
Right. And it's sinking in with some people because, like you say that we talked about before, he's about 4 or 5 to 1 in youth vote. Anybody below 30 is all over Bernie, and she's won a 51-point lead. That's hard to do. And she has a good line against it. She says, if a vote from 2002 is not a plan, right? And that's true, right? But it also does tell you. I mean, she has a pretty good pattern. If you want to say, she's much closer to being a Republican than I am, that's provable in a number of ways. And that's what he's doing. He's laying out this case. You want to vote for a Republican? Hillary is your choice. And people are, all the spotlights on the right and how far right things are being pulled. Well, things are being pulled far to the left too. The left, the Democratic Party is going to be asking us to vote for candidates for things that have never won elections in America before.
Yeah, and that concerns me. But it'll be interesting to see. I mean, we still haven't seen all the things I think come out about this campaign yet on the Democratic side. I mean, I think the Democrats are definitely struggling with this whole idea of how you go and make sure that Hillary stays in the game, and and even going back to Trump talking about how the system is rigged. If there is a system that is rigged,
right,
it's the Democrat. I mean, the super delegates. I mean, come on, give me a break. I mean, the Republicans. I think the Republicans at least are pretty transparent. The Democrats, the super delegates. I mean, there was even the Clinton people are out saying, well, Sanders is trying to undermine the process by trying to sway away the super delegates that are loyal to Hillary.
What's he supposed to do?
Yeah, exactly. What in the heck is he supposed to do?
He's not for you.
Yeah,
he's for the other guy.
Yeah, I mean, but Bernie does pick up a little bit of momentum. He does get an endorsement here, endorsement there from members of Congress, from senators.
Right.
It's still probably too little, too late. But we don't hear as much really about Bernie and his effect on the Democratic National Convention and what could possibly happen there. I don't, there's not going to be a contested convention in all likelihood. I mean, Hillary should have this wrapped up fairly soon by delegate count. But Bernie can make her life miserable, creating a very interesting scenario for them. Maybe not quite as interesting as Republicans, but still, but it's not talked about by the media very much.
They are not going to be able to make it look united. The Republicans aren't either. I mean, it's going to look like a fracas, which it's going to be, right? But the Democrats is too. These people are not going to back down, and they're closer than you think, right? They're now picking up delegates at a much faster rate. Can they catch her? No, especially when enough votes are held safe by the party through the superdelegates to where it's really the superdelegates fixing it, right? So what we are finding out, on both sides this year is that the popular vote in these primaries it's basically all a beauty contest.
Right.
know?
Yeah. And Trump has talked about I've won. I have won more votes than anybody, but it really doesn't matter. For this purpose at all. So let's talk about Bill and Hillary and just a couple of things that have popped up too. So last week, Bill gets interrupted by a Black Lives Matter protester at a speech, and he goes off on a tirade. And this has a lot to do, really everything to do, with his crime bill from when he was president, and blacks of blaming the Clintons really for this. And for the high incarceration rate of blacks, and then we put that in conjunction with Saturday night that Hillary and Mayor of New York Bill de Blasio did a little skit that had some racial tinge to it as well. So let's talk about that. I mean, what do you think about what happened with Clinton and his tirade? I thought he blew a stack. I'm not saying he was necessarily completely wrong to fire back. I kind of actually liked his the way he kind of put that person down. But on the other hand, it showed me, are the Clintons becoming a little unhinged, and the sensitivity, if you want to call it that. I don't really have to get into that when I'm talking politics necessarily for this, but the skit was bad on Saturday. On top of that,
the first time I saw the video of him responding to the Black Lives Matter protester, I couldn't hear the sound, and it was really interesting because he was angry. I mean, you could, without being able to hear what he was saying, just the look on his face and the way he was wagging his finger. And when I went back and heard it, I'm like, yeah, he was angry. Okay, the 94 crime bill is probably one of his best accomplishments, especially from our perspective. It took a generation of violent criminals off the street. Now, you got to remember what was going on there. D.C., they were killing 700 people a year over crack, right? The country was in an uproar. Major cities, gang wars all over the country. Here's one thing that said, if you do a violent crime, you're going to go away and you're going to stay away. You're going to do your time. That had never been tried before. And guess what? It works. All those guys spent 30 years cooling their heels. Now, yeah, it devastated them. It took some people out of communities, right? That's true. But those people also weren't beating, robbing, killing people, right? So, at the time, though, she talked about what was the question? Predators, something like that.
Super predators.
Super predators.
Was, yeah.
Right. And there was a lot of literature at the time. There was a lot of talk at the time about there's this generation of people who are completely amoral, completely violence infused, and out of control, and pose a real threat to society. She wasn't the only one saying that. A lot of people were talking about that. And the 94 crime bill can be said to have addressed, to the extent that it existed, to have addressed it. It put people in prison. It wasn't a bad idea.
Right, and the thing about all these things, when we talk about these things, the blacks who get upset about the high incarceration rate, the thing is that, it comes back to that saying. I mean, if you do the crime, you've got to do the time.
Right. And as he pointed out, who were the victims of those crimes? It wasn't guys like us living in the suburbs. It was other black people. That's
right.
who they were shooting.
Right. And that seems to be kind of the unspoken thing, is that they don't like to talk about black on black crime, and
right.
that's a huge problem, and it's a problem for society. This is not trying to be racial. This is a problem. This is a real problem, and I think when you go into a lot of these inner city areas and you talk to the people there, I mean, they understand. Look, that guy beat this guy over the head. He shot this old lady or whatever. They realize this is a problem. The problem for Clinton, in this regard for Hillary, is just that I think she feels the pressure now to walk some of this back from some of the things that she said.
She shouldn't do.
Right.
Like the Reuters poll the next day, not going to hurt the Clintons. I'm telling you, African Americans are going to vote for the Clintons in overwhelming numbers. She is the logical successor to Obama. The black women in the 2012 election, 99% voted for Obama. If it had been 79%, Romney would be president.
Yeah, so that's a big difference, And then we talk about, right on the heels of this comes this skit. Now, this was supposed to be a funny little thing at this annual black tie event that they do in New York, and politicians are supposed to be funny, and we've seen this with the White House Correspondents' Dinner and things like that. But it was something that got quite a bit of attention because as Hillary was trying to say, she kind of complained about how long it took for de Blasio to endorse her. He says, I'm sorry, I was on CP time. The audience groans. There were a lot of blacks in the audience. They groaned because they immediately thought of the epithet, the racial terminology of colored people's time, referring to people being perpetually late. Hillary kind of comes back and says, well, that's something else. What was it? Some politician's time thing, and it didn't work. It didn't really work. I mean, de Blasio's tried to apologize for this, and
who's married to African American.
Yeah, right.
So
That's true.
they're inoculated.
And Hillary's excuse is she's basically deferred to de Blasio, saying that, well, it was his skit,
right?
and everything that. And de Blasio's defense basically is that this is a joke. You're missing the point. But look, I mean, even Andrea Mitchell said this was an offensive, racist joke. But we know that Democrats can't be racist, so that probably was no racial tension, right?
So we're confused.
That's right. We're the confused people on that. It's amazing how that all happens. One other thing I want to talk about before we just do our little sports report here too is just the other day, Josh Earnest, the White House press secretary, during one of the briefings, was asked about the Clinton email scandal. He had just had an interview with Chris Wallace on Fox and defended Hillary's use of the private email server and said she was a great Secretary of State. She might have been a little careless, but didn't think that she was violating national security and all. He basically claimed that Obama is getting his information on the email scandal from press reports. Really not saying that he's been briefed. This is the President of the United States. I mean, are we supposed to believe that that the President of the United States is relying upon the press, the media, to give him his information on this, that he is not more than up to snuff, that with a presidential election coming up with, the chosen one supposed to succeed him, that he doesn't know more than what the press reports?
He's not talking to Lynch every day. Give me a
Yeah, I mean, what is that? I mean, this is incredible. Yeah. I don't understand this at all.
There may be a kernel of truth to it, because if I was him, I would be backing out of that situation. I would be, I don't hear anything, what's going on, because he can't win. If they don't indict her, it looks like a stonewall. If they do indict her, she'll never be president. So what do? They're in a box, and there's 147 FBI agents working on it. And there's the Gowdy Committee working on Benghazi, which is, a bunch of confluent issues we now know, right? So something's going to happen, one way or the other. And they're probably, if I was Hillary, I would want that indictment today. Let's get going, because
get it
you
out
need
of
it as long from here to November to discredit it or get exonerated or whatever, because now you must go through the process to get exonerated. If they no-bill it, they say, oh, we're not going to prosecute, then we're going to say, okay, fix was in, right? They're this long, this much information, this many interviews, this many documents collected. They're not doing that to say, nothing.
Right, and I think you have a point there in terms of Obama. I don't blame them for trying to at least claim that, I only know what I see in the media, because he needs to kind of distance himself a little bit from this, because she's a powder keg. I mean, she gets indicted and everything like this. Everything collapses for the Democrats. So it's a tricky situation. I think you're right. I think they are boxed in on this, and but it's just hard to believe that, oh, well, it's the press. That's his only reports are coming from the press. I mean, I don't know really who's buying that angle.
Right, and the press is, there's no way whoever comes out of this damaged Republican process can win. Like, really? Against someone under indictment? Like, whatever. It's wide open once after those conventions. That'll be the wildest 3 months of politics ever.
Yeah, and it's already been pretty wild up to now. All right, so we're going to kind of close the program out with our little sports report. Always talking about the Nationals. Love baseball. They're now 5-1. They won again last night. Not exactly against the top-level competition yet, but it's still 5 wins.
Yeah, the Braves are 0-7, so they are 5.5 games out of first in the middle of April. Think about that. I mean, that's a big mountain to climb. It's almost a week of baseball you got to make up. What we talked about earlier was they have, the Marlins, Phillies, Braves. You need to beat up on them. You need to win 10, 15 or so of your 19 games with them. Pound them. Okay. Then whatever happens with the rest of the league, you've got a base of wins there, right? Play the Mets even, pound the other guys, and that's what they're doing. They're 5-1 against the Braves and the Marlins.
Right, and that was one of the problems they had last year, is that they couldn't beat the teams they needed to beat,
Right.
And so they lost. So this year, I mean, the pitching, we'll see. Gio had a good night last night. We'll see how the bullpen did a good job.
Right.
We'll see how this turns out once the competition ratchets up, and we're only 6 games into a 162 game season, so we got a long slog ahead of us. And then tomorrow night, the Caps start their playoff run, and I hope it's deep, but I've definitely been disappointed before, but I'd love to see them at least get to the finals again.
The hockey tournament, the playoffs, is one of, like we were talking about, NCAA tournament, there's never been a 16 beat a 1. There's been, 4 15s beat 2s in the history of the thing. The NHL, it's like 8s beat 1s all the time. Every minute of that is just, gosh, you don't even know what's going to happen, right? It's upset city. So, you want to avoid that since they're the top seed, right? They're on the top line all the way down, right?
Right.
So, but that's what you're up against.
Yeah, well, home ice advantage won't mean much if they don't win.
That's right.
And everything. All right, well, thanks a lot for joining us today. Thank you, Brian, for joining me, and thanks to our studio engineer, Spencer Irvine, post-production engineer, Stephen Irvine. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, like our Facebook page, and if you want to watch this live every week on Periscope, you follow Don Irvine, myself, on Periscope. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you again next week.